Right, here we are, Friday. It's my favorite day of the week because, well, actually this week because we got Memorial Day coming, but it is my favorite day of the week because we got API storytelling. Let me bring the crew on. Start with Mike. Hey, Mike.
Hey there.
How's it going?
All right, how you doing? I'm ready for some stories.
Me too. Me too. I've been working hard this week, so I'm ready
you?
just for some fun API blah 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 rather than the more business kind that I've been doing. So
Is that what we are? Are we just the blah blah blah? The yada 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 part? Is that what we are?
According to my daughter, that's what I do. So that's what I hear. Let's bring on Aidan.
All right.
Hey, Aidan.
Hey guys, I'm happy to be the blah blah blah. That's where all the fun stuff happens.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And so on and so forth.
Blah 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 is yeah. I mean, after you do it long enough, I think it's the Charlie Brown kind of. I think that was my daughter's point. It's like yeah, exactly. API wah 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 wah.
Yeah, we're like a puppy dog. It's like blah 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 API blah 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 API.
Exactly.
For the people listening at home, you should keep listening. It gets better.
Oh yeah, it does. Yeah, it goes up from here.
Yeah, most usually. Well, welcome you guys. I have new lights on, but it's actually making me sweat. So like, I'm gonna have to turn them off here because
you can't turn them off now, man.
Yeah, I know. Anyways, I'll figure that out later on or post-production or something. Anyways, we got a guest today. Another guest, kind of in the same vein as last week. I would say when it comes to core API storytelling in the space, last week we had David Berland on from Programmable Web, which is the grandfather, the OG storytelling platform for APIs, and he kind of took us back, way back actually. That was pretty cool. But when it comes to the next generation, and I say it's been Nordic APIs has been going on, I think 2000, we'll ask him a bit, 2013, 14, I remember it coming together. And as far as like API storytelling, it's the premier platform. And David danced around it last week and we didn't really go into it, but I would say like Programmable Web has seen its day. It's definitely, it's the SEO kind of place where you go. But if you really want to understand what's going on in the space and know how to do APIs and understand where things are headed, Nordic APIs is where you go to do this. And so we have Bill, who is the editor-in-chief and kind of makes everything magical happen there on our show today. Let me bring him in.
Hey everybody.
Hello.
Hey.
Hey, Bill.
Honored to be joining the blah 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 crew this week. Thanks for having me. And yeah, huge, enormous credit to Programmable Web. They gave me some of my first chances to write about APIs back in the day, in around 2014, through David and Wendell Santos and their team. And yeah, to answer your question, Ken, Nordic APIs started in 2013, and I came on in 2015 as editor-in-chief. And huge credit to you as well, Ken. Like, your stories and coverage of the space, inspired me to learn more. And similar with everyone here on the call, I'm guessing, and thousands of others. So,
well, thank you. But I was never a credible source of information.
You told me that before. I trusted the word you wrote.
Yeah, I'm sure I disclosed it somewhere. You probably just didn't read it. But
yeah,
no,
should have done more research.
It was not a credible location to understand what's happening. Sure, I talked about APIs, but thank you. I appreciate that. So tell, for our listeners or viewers, like, what is Nordic APIs? Like, what's the purpose? What's the mission? What's the vision? What do you guys do?
So the driving goal has always been to help make the world more programmable. And it started off as a conference series. and still is happening like that, outside of COVID. We hope to return to that. A conference series in the Nordic region when there wasn't really one. So it was kind of filling that gap when Travis Spencer and Andreas Krohn started it in 2013. And we've kind of taken it on the road in the past and even brought it to Austin. So we've done 3 similar like platform summits in Austin as well. So right now it's a global API community spreading thought leadership and knowledge around the space. I've been having a lot of fun with it over the years. I started in 2013, and we've just been trying to see like how many different angles we can approach this API strategy problem. And there's always new protocols coming out. There's always new design styles and new business strategies. So we're really trying to balance all of our coverage on that and do so in a way that's hopefully vendor neutral and, resonates with people. It's an ongoing quest.
No, I think you guys are finding, it took me a long time to find my voice as API evangelist, like what I felt, what was comfortable, what was repeatable, because you have to do it regularly and not get sick of it.
Totally.
And so, I think you guys have nailed it. I mean, you guys, and hopefully you can keep it, because that's the other trick is maintaining it. But so I have one, I did a story last week with David Berlin. I have one in a similar vein with Nordic APIs, is because when Andreas asked me to come, when API days first started, we all kind of rallied behind Mehdi and helped, get API days going. Mike and I were at the early ones in Paris, and we did the same with Andreas and Nordic. And so I came to Stockholm and was one of the keynotes at the first event. And I got the flu. And so I woke up in the morning of my keynote and I was sick as a dog. And I was like, I gotta go, do you cancel? What, I was just like, I was really sick. I was like, do I go make other people sick? And so I decided, well, I'm gonna go do the keynote, but I'm not gonna hang out and shake hands and get other people sick. And so I was just really 100-something degree fever, just not feeling good. Did the talk, left, went back to the hotel, and my wife had happened to come with me, and I booked the hotel, which I never do because I'm not allowed to, because for this reason I always book really bad hotels. It was like a kind of Soviet era concrete building, way uncomfortable in the middle of nowhere. You had to walk like 5 miles to get something to eat. And anyways, this is what I remember is I went to sleep. I woke up and her saying, we're moving, I got us a new hotel, we're moving. And I just, all right, got in the cab, went to sleep, like woke up like 3 days later, just hallucinating, just really sick. And I was in the ABBA hotel. I woke up in the ABBA hotel, which has the ABBA museum in it. And I was still kind of hallucinating, and she made me walk through the ABBA museum. And wow, man, like just wow, just like there's interactive, you get to sing, I was like singing songs, and I was like, totally out of it. And then I got to hang out with everybody after the event. Once I got back, there's still a few people in town, but that's my Nordic APIs, first Nordic API.
Yes. Dancing queen and everything.
Exactly. I've got photos of me. So
I was gonna say, do you guarantee that as everyone's first experience, or is that one of a kind?
Well, okay, for a time, I don't know if they still have this, but there's this subway that connects Arlanda, the airport, to downtown Stockholm, called the Arlanda Express. And for a few years, they literally had someone from ABBA on the intercom, like welcoming you to Stockholm. So yeah, actually, it is kind of guaranteed. I guess they've taken advantage of that for their tourism.
That's great.
Yeah.
So storytelling, taking it back to storytelling, Bill, how'd you land this gig? What's your history with storytelling? What brought you to this kind of domain?
Yeah, great question. Well, my major in college, I went to the University of Washington and actually studied creative writing. So that was my primary focus. Always been fascinated with technology. I took some JavaScript courses on campus too, and actually did like a lot of software entrepreneurship courses as well. But when it came down to it, you know, my major was English, and so creative writing and storytelling was like a big part of the curriculum. And I was cool. It was cool when you brought this up and you started doing this, because the whole idea of storytelling really resonates with what I do on a daily basis, and it got me thinking like how true that is, and maybe a lot that I studied I've just been using subconsciously without really even acknowledging it. So yeah, I guess I had some thoughts on that to share today. If you guys are interested, kind of digging into some of those storytelling elements.
Yeah.
Dig in.
Cool. So one of the things that really resonated with me from like those courses I took was a screenwriting class I did with Sean Wong, and he's a prominent writer and screenwriter. He wrote American Knees, which was like adapted to film, and so he's in Seattle. And one day he brought in Brian McDonald, who is this cool screenwriting guru. Like he works with Pixar, Disney, and Industrial Light and Magic to kind of go into their shops to help them with their screenwriting techniques. And obviously he's like wrote screenplays as well. And he manages this podcast called You Are a Storyteller. So it was cool to get his perspective when he came in. And one thing that really stuck with me was this concept of armature that he always talks about. And it kind of comes from this point where he was working with these props development people, and he saw that they were creating these props out of clay, but they always started with this metal frame, because if you just were to put clay together, then it would all fall apart. So he kind of used that as an analogy to talk about the point of a piece of story, like the point of a body of work. I mean, if you believe that stories are telling like survival lessons, I mean, it's less of survival in tech, but we use them for survival in our industry. If you believe that, then all stories have some sort of meaning. They want to impart some sort of lesson if they're going to be valuable to people. So for screenwriters, it often boils down to like a single phrase, this whole concept of armature. And once you know it, you start seeing it all the time. And sometimes it's actually like written out, like in The Wizard of Oz, there's no place like home would be the most basic like concept of armature. You know, it's the realization that you have everything that you're looking for the whole time right at home. Or another example is in The Shawshank Redemption. The character of Red Redding, played by Morgan Freeman, he says either get busy living or get busy dying. And that's kind of the theme throughout the whole movie. And you see that actually play out. And he's super happy and jovial in prison. And then there's another clone character who ends up just killing himself at the end of the film. And so it kind of shows you different perspectives on how to go about your life and, you know, interpret what's going around you. I know another option is like, or another aphorism that could be armature is like, some things are more important than money. We see that in a lot of films, like so many times it becomes a trope. Action is better than inaction. You know, there's like these life lessons that a film is really about. You might see people getting their head slaughtered and all this action, but for something to really have like meaning, often the writer just starts with this basic aphorism, and that's something that's called armature, which Brian McDonald kind of coined. So I think it's cool to think of how those sort of techniques could apply to like technology education. And for me, it's like thesis-driven stuff. Articles should have a point, and you should be like referencing that throughout. So maybe I'll just pause right there.
Yeah, I mean, that resonates with me. I'm fascinated by your experience with writers, right? Like you have to see all examples of this. I've never seen this, but I've tried to study storytelling as well. At least Western style storytelling, a little bit of Eastern. So I had never heard of this idea of armature, but it totally makes sense. And when I think back on stories or presentations that have worked for me, it turns out, yeah, I had one of those. I had one of those, I called it a hook, or I had a sort of a theme. And my experience, and this may just maybe because of, lack of skill or talent or whatever, often I don't know the theme until I'm almost done, or I've already completed it, or I've already trashed it. In other words, sometimes I've actually discovered the theme partway through and I've been like, oh crap, well, that's actually not what I was working on at all, and I have to go back. But I think when I think about it, a lot of the things that resonate, no matter whether it's a C-suite or developers or anywhere in between, it's when you do have that kind of like theme or message or piece. I had never really thought about it that way. I think armatures are a really interesting way to think about it.
And you bring up a really cool point that Brian McDonald talks about. It's like people have different ways to go about telling a story. Sometimes you like understand that message and that theme subconsciously, and it just comes out. And like you said, at the end of it, you're like, oh, here's the point. But sometimes, they take some people take a more prescriptionist view, and they like start with that kind of guiding light to begin with, which is something he recommends for writers.
Yeah, I mean, I could see being deliberate about it and being valuable. I definitely come at it from the other, where I'm looking for the heart connection. Like, this has to mean something to me. It has to and to be relatable to someone else. It's got to be that human piece. So I'm going to find something that's meaningful and connectable to people. That's what I'm going to focus on. I would say rarely do I sit down and deliberately do that, but that's definitely the reverse side of it, is I end up at the same place.
Yeah, I think another interesting thing that I was thinking about when you were talking, Bill, is there's so many different ways we're trying to like get this message of APIs or whatever it is out to all these different kinds of people. And just like you have like a ton of movies that have that armature, there's no place like home. The way you communicate that to a 5-year-old might be different than the way you communicate it to a 20-year-old or 50-year-old, or someone who likes action movies, or someone who likes to be scared. Like, I'm sure there's a horror movie with that message too. I don't know the plot of this movie. I could experiment and try to figure out some ideas, but there's definitely one that does that, or that's part of the message. So yeah, at the lead-in when we were talking about different podcasts and different stakeholders, like this is something we're all trying to share this API message with people, but there's maybe different stories we can tell them to help sort of like a lock and a key, like open it for them.
No, completely. I completely, agree. Brian McDonald talks about how the style of the writer really plays a role in how they go about responding to that armature, or like representing that armature. Because exactly what you said, you could represent that in like a million different ways. If we're going about with the thesis that APIs are good, everyone here is going to have a different sort of story and how they explain that and write about it.
Well, it definitely moves beyond. I would say when I started writing in this space and trying to find the voice, like I didn't want to deliberately go and be structured like that. I wasn't that purposeful. My wife did help me kind of think through things. I mean, the hat is a creation of hers. She's like, you're just a boring white dude. No one's gonna notice you. So like, wear a hat. That'll change things. He's like, and you look better with your beard. You look kind of goofy without a beard.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the beard, that must be part of
yeah, the beard and the hat were both deliberate, but as part of the storytelling kind of toolkit. Because she's like, when you get on stage, like no one's gonna remember you. Like you just look like every other white dude. And which is true, because when I did shave it the first time and didn't have my hat, she didn't recognize me. Like I went to meet her and she didn't, like I'd been with her for 4 years and I went to meet her and she didn't recognize me. How I noticed people, what got people's attention in this space was telling people they're wrong, causing fights. It was it was the Rastafarian days where everyone was really mean to each other and just kind of, no, you're wrong, you're doing it, And I was like, I knew I didn't want to be that, because that's like, my hacker news cred is still very high because of me learning in that time, where like oh, I can get page views and I can get links. I can get people looking
Yeah.
at my stuff. That's not a problem. But if I'm going to reach people and if I'm going to like help move the needle and you know, I've got to find this other piece and really finding the armatures that resonate with enterprise folks and get people emailing me in their jobs where they're not a public persona, but sharing, hey, you wrote about this thing and it really mattered to me in my job because like my boss hates me, I hate my boss, we're underfunded, like, and the things that I would focus on would connect with them. So really, you know, but now I'll probably become more deliberate now that I know about armatures and the other thing. You know, I'll get a little bit more calculating about it. So
hopefully it doesn't change your style too much. I think the beard and hat is working.
I'm back at it.
Yeah.
That's why I've got the earpiece now, because so hopefully, it's my shtick.
I think, you know, Ken, you and I talked, it was right about the same time, around 2012, 2013. I remember a conversation, I don't know if it was at the API Days Paris first time or if it was out there in Colorado, but I think you and I were having this discussion about how we've been at this for a while, but not making any connections or having difficulty connecting. And you were the one that actually, you just said to me, well, I'm just going to start telling stories. And I found that like absolutely gobsmacking at the moment. It's like, just telling stories. Can you do that? Is that even possible? Is that allowed? I got to have a slide with 4 bullets on it, right? And some tech. So this kind of addresses to Bill, and that is a sense that, you know, from your standpoint as a writer, as someone who comes from sort of, you know, the writery perspective, stories connect us in different ways and sort of touch us in different ways. So how is that sort of affected how or what you write about in your Nordic space? Like, do you really see yourself as a creative writer in the tech space, or do you see yourself as applying your writing skills to your tech? I mean, how do you really think about it consciously?
Yeah, I've never considered myself a creative writer. More of like I'm applying those ideas. And not until like the other day did I realize that I was actually doing that, maybe. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, it just kind of happens. But to answer your question, this like stories are being told all the time, and we do so unconsciously. I mean, I would argue that a case study is a story. Companies experience trying to use some sort of framework or their journey, you know, adopting open API and, you know, generating documentation or something like that. All that is a story, and stories have very predictable patterns, and you can see how stories are laid out and spot them. Something like the 3-act structure, where you have some sort of state where you start, and then a problem is introduced. You go through a journey, you have experiences, you learn, there's a pinnacle, and then there's some sort of solution. And so often in our writing about the space, we go through that same exact journey, right? It's like, let's talk about monoliths, for example. You have this monolith, and it's hard to manage. It's really complex, right? And so you go through this process of breaking it down into microservices, and then that causes some other problem, and then you introduce some sort of service-to-service management layer, and voila, there's one solution for your networking issues, you know. And so these like persuasive sort of essays that we're just cranking out all the time about whether it be some sort of product or open source software, a lot of them are just stories when it boils down to it.
How do you know what to write about? Like, do you guys have any sort of ideation process or feedback loop that drives it? What sets it in motion?
Spidey senses.
Yeah.
Just feeling it out. I wish I had a better process. It's just kind of a one-person editorial team, and I'm sure at larger presences they have more of a structure for this. But really, it's I owe some credit to other people in the space, like Matthew Reinbold, or let's see, API Developer Weekly, run by James Higginbotham and Keith Casey. So I feel like I'm always consuming and regurgitating ideas.
Yeah.
And obviously, it's not just me. There's like a lot of writers involved with Nordic APIs, and we offer the ability to contribute to the space for just people part of the community too. And I think that's really important. Really want to welcome like any sort of coverage that we haven't fully exhausted or that we need to revisit, you know, because things are always changing. So the genesis of ideas, yeah, it's kind of hard to pinpoint, honestly.
A lot of times for me, what I kind of notice, I talk to people a lot, even though I'm, you know, here in Research Central in the basement of my house. I end up talking to, you know, several people every single week, somebody different every single week. And I've gotten into the habit over the last couple of years of taking notes during these conversations. I didn't have the opportunity to record easily the conversations. Now I can, but I'm in the habit of taking notes, and I find myself, what I find sort of like repeating themes, like, you know, I'm talking an awful lot about interoperability, or I'm talking an awful lot about open formats, or I'm talking an awful lot about errors or testing or observability. And then that sort of, you know, sort of like becomes a little flag in my head. And one of the things that I end up spending a lot of time doing is, and it's sort of been my pattern, is to connect. It's like, well, this sounds a lot like what so-and-so was telling me when she was the CEO of X or something. So a lot of times what gets me started or what gives me material is who I've been talking to at the time. And, you know, so part of my effort is to try to keep talking to lots and lots of people. So I get some of it reading, but it turns out, at least in the last couple of years, ironically, especially in the last year, it's mostly from talking to people, listening, rather than reading.
If you listen enough, you can notice people's hardships. You know, you can see these patterns of behaviors where people are struggling, and then you can create content that hopefully offers guidance.
Well, and the other one for me, just to quickly respond, is also, it's a lot of times it's a light bulb moment. I'm talking to someone and they're explaining to me their product or their service or their journey and their solution, and I'm going, wow, that's crazy, like, or that's amazing, or that's weird. You know, those are the ones that really, I've been, especially in the last several months, been really focusing on solutions rather than problems, just, you know, because I just kind of fell into it. And there are amazingly creative people coming up with seemingly ridiculous solutions that are great. And that's been a real charge for me. I really enjoyed that.
Mike, do you ever find yourself trying to respond in story form to things you're just confused about? Because like this was a big part of me assigning topics to writers in Nordic APIs. I'll just be honestly confused about a topic and want like more information about it. And I think like, hey, if I don't understand this, there must be thousands of other people that similarly don't get this subject. So I'm just gonna recognize I'm an idiot and then let someone try to figure this out.
That definitely happens sometimes. The problem for me is that list of things that I'm confused about is endless. So it gets really kind of depressing to go through the list. But what happens is if I start bumping up into the same problem or bumping up into the same confusion as then I'm like, well, all right, okay, I best guess get Wikipedia something. I got to get started on this one. And I'm an odd, at least to me, sense. I go down a rabbit hole. So I read an article, and this is from my old habits of reading and researching. I find an article that's interesting, and as soon as I realize it's talking about what I'm interested in, I flip to the back and look at all of the references. Okay, so I got to read these too. You know, so I keep digging further and further. So the internet has been a great boon to me because it shortens the number of times I have to go to the library and dig things up. But often, the confusing part is usually the ones that I simply cannot avoid, you know, because I'm confused all the time. But if there's things that I just can't get past, then that becomes one for me. I don't know about you or Adrian. Aidan, what's it like for you?
Well, when I don't understand something, I tend to go in a really deep rabbit hole, or I try to find like 10 people who can explain it to me, and then I try to synthesize what they said. And I have this trick that kind of works, where I will tell people that I'm going to combine their answers to my common questions and then share it back to them. And then that has like a interesting consequence. The first is that people tend to be much more deliberate with how they answer, which may be good or may be bad. But then afterward, I get to send out a round of everyone's answers, like the 5 people I asked about the thing, to the whole group, and then they will respond to that a second time. So it's like 2 or 3 passes. That's typically what I'll try to do. But a lot of the time, a lot of the time, I think when I'm trying to figure something out, I also just sort of do it. And I think I maybe learn slower because my sometimes that's my instinct, is just to go figure it out. But there's so much leverage you can get when you ask other people and when you make it a like collaborative process. But there are those times where I just block off Saturday afternoon to learn something.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. You know, you talk about maybe learning slower. I definitely think I learn slower for lots of reasons. I'm not degreed in the computer space, so a lot of the vocabulary is still challenging to me. And honestly, as I have been getting more, what would we say, mature, wizened, whatever you want to say, it takes me longer. Like when I hear somebody or I read something, I'm like, I got to read that again. So it definitely takes me longer. And in the long run, I think I enjoy it more. But there are moments when I'm just like, I'm so slow. All these kids are killing me. But I definitely have that. So I got to ask, knowing what you know, Bill, I mean, when people write at Nordic, do you notice these things, like the themes, the patterns? I know you were sort of walking through the heroics, the hero's journey bits, I think a little bit too there. Do these things kind of come out as editor? Are you like, well, you need to do a little bit more on the pinnacle here, or you need to do a little bit more on the armature? Do you talk like that with the folks that are writing for you?
I don't really use creative writing terminologies, but I'll use more like business terminologies, like, hey, we need to adjust the thesis here. It doesn't really match the flow of the article. Thankfully, I've had to repeat this kind of stuff enough that a lot of the writers and contributors just understand what we're doing, and they kind of understand like you need to create like this cohesive piece that makes sense and flows, and you know, what's brought up as concrete details support a thesis on top, and concluding remarks should kind of wrap things up. Obviously, that's kind of a very structured approach, but if you're putting things out like 3 times a week, it kind of helps to have a common structure, honestly.
Yeah.
And I love what Aidan's saying about like noticing patterns and asking for feedback and organizing all these like shared viewpoints. I think that's really cool. That's something that we sort of have to do if we're trying to represent like all these technical nuances in a non-vendor way, because everyone has their own understandings and definitions for all these new concepts. I mean, we're juggling all these new terminologies that are on the cutting edge. They're super nuanced. Everyone has a different like definition. You can't just go to Merriam-Webster and understand what some of these words are, and there'll be like multiple different acronyms for the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, DevX, DX, developer experience, you know, that's just one example. We're just constantly trying to look at a lot of chatter and synthesize that and find this common thread to then represent again. And hopefully that's more accurate because it synthesizes a lot of different perspectives into like one coalesced version of all that. So that sort of coalescing effect, I find myself having to go through quite often.
Well, and it's all about creating, like learning and synthesizing and distilling, but then putting it back out there so people believe it, or hopefully believe it, and then live it. And so one acronym I'll put out there and see if you guys can tell where it's from. This is what I've been writing to all week. Is called Flappy M. Anybody know what Flappy M is?
Yeah.
Full life cycle API management.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So Gartner.
Okay.
So I've been responding to the Gartner Magic Quadrant survey all week is what I've had my head in. And as far as like trying to craft the narrative, it's not my narrative. Like I'm responding to a set of questions put forth by analysts who have been out supposedly gathering and listening to all the companies across the space about what and how they do. And then they ask a set of questions and then they put those questions back out, kind of a la Aidan style. And then us vendors respond to those questions. And then it's a virtuous cycle.
Right.
But that acronym, because it's a nested acronym too, because it's full lifecycle API, application programming interface management.
Yeah.
But you have to use this word often because otherwise you're writing that whole phrase out, and it really is. It's really just screws with my head, But as far as like trying to influence people, like my difficulty in writing to this is, I'm like, this is wrong. This isn't the way things are. I want to change that. But I can't because it's Gartner, right? Like, how do I change the way they see the world? I have to speak Gartnerese right now because I'm wanting them to anoint us in the Magic Quadrant. So I have to speak to them, but it's wrong, And so I see Nordic APIs as being very. I mean, you guys have laid down such a steady set rhythm of storytelling for so long now. Like you guys are controlling and steering how the space thinks with that storytelling. So, as far as the editorial process, you say ideation, and is there any sort of overarching strategic, like, any sort of evil master plan that you guys have as far as like steering the world in a certain direction?
Oh God, no. I think a lot of it is just distilling trends and interesting ideas and realizing that we don't know everything, and hopefully that realization will lead to some better insights. Really, but yeah, it's I'm honored people think that way, and I do want it to be kind of a really helpful resource for people. But it's not something like the industry standard for yada yada specification. It's a way of thinking that if it helps you, it helps you. Also, I like the kind of to take it back to the storytelling aspect, especially like movies and screenplay. I like the idea of universe, right? We're all kind of creating our own universes, and we're creating our own definitions and having different dialogues. And you do this with internal linking all the time on any sort of site that you manage. You're creating your own Marvel universe, and the characters are articles essentially. And so that's something that I really like doing as a site like maintainer, is just knowing what knowledge we have already covered and then like linking back to that, so that we're always building and we're always trying to help the reader to guide back to previous stuff we may have already covered. Or maybe this article is kind of reinventing that topic, or like shedding new light on it from a different perspective. So keeping your universe in order, I think, is really important, and making sure there's consistency and you're not like saying anything wrong in the past and like trying to correct that in the future, or if you do, just being open about it. So
there's canon, right?
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of a responsibility with making sure that somebody doesn't come up to you and say, now listen, this character in this universe did not say that 3 years ago. And now you're suddenly telling me. There's no way that this works. Right? So you have some kind of responsibility there for maintaining some cohesive or coherence in the Nordic universe, right?
In like the film production world, they call this congruity, and people are actually like it'll be their sole jobs, just making sure like this coffee mug is placed in the right way for the second shot to capture.
That's right. That was a continuity, right? It's like there's always a person that's like, no, that has to be off to the left, or you have to move the clock back, 5 minutes, stuff like that, right? So that's kind of some of your role at Nordic, right? You're making sure that the coffee cup's in the right spot.
Yeah.
One of the interesting sort of parallels to what you're talking about, Bill, that I'd love to hear your feedback on is sort of how I think Nordic is one of those areas your agenda has always been to be neutral. I think that's really cool. But I think there are times when we all kind of write articles that are trying to like help the community see something maybe differently. And that is like a whole other kind of writing. You have a little bit of a different armature. And I've also found, just from my own experience, that like when I write things that are too persuasive, the people who engage with them are very different than the people who engage with something that's more open-ended. And I often learn more from writing something open-ended and starting a conversation than writing something really persuasive. But the persuasive thing seems to travel further and get to more people, and people talk about it more. And it's like a really interesting kind of dichotomy of like, what is your goal and how do you make the world a little better? And I'm sure you've thought about some of this too with your guys' responsibility you have.
Yeah, completely. Especially like if we're comparing two different technologies, sometimes you want to be persuasive, but also you want to showcase the benefits and drawbacks of each approach. So yeah, I try to be balanced and make sure we're offering both sides of the argument there. And then like the implementer can decide what's best for them. So that's kind of always been the strategy I've used on Nordic APIs. But sometimes you do want to offer an opinion, and that can be helpful to others. And I don't think we should fully just banish that away or ignore the possibility for that helping other people. So yeah, sometimes we'll use the persuasive sort of essay format a little bit more. Yeah.
What's your favorite? Do you prefer writing or the event portion of what you do?
Oh, that's a great question. I like writing because you just get to. Maybe I'm more of an introvert that way when I'm creating. I just get to like control the dialogue, and now I'm talking like screenplay people. Yeah.
You can talk any way you like.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is storytellers, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're blah blahing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I don't know. They're very hard to compare, but the events is great. I love seeing people networking and actually hearing people face to face and understanding their stories and their perspectives, because that's where a lot of the inspiration comes from. I mean, we can take a lot of input from all this online chatter, and we're going to have to in the future, where things are kind of heading. But physical events, you really uncover a lot of stories that might have been shrouded by the algorithms, and it really helps you uncover things. I don't know if that can really be replaced just by the default kind of inherent nature of online communities.
Yeah, in that sense, I started I'm very much just a writer person, a speaker person, and I've always had to try to work on being a better listener. And one of the ways that I did that was to help get involved in the RestFest project about 10 years ago. And that was born actually out of that notion of I need to spend more time listening to others. So let's make it easy for others to speak. So that was kind of in the sense that sort of platforming idea. Let's get some other people, because this was also about the same time that Ken was talking about the sort of the rest anger days or something like that. We wanted to kind of get beyond it. But I noticed that my enjoyment or my experience on the RestFest events is tuned very differently. So once I get to the RestFest event, I don't have to have an opinion on anything anymore. Like I don't have to like write out or justify or research or balance or edit or anything. That's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing instead is I'm getting to, like you say, interact with people directly, people whose voices I don't normally hear. And that's a really, really rewarding experience. It's also really, really challenging. And RestFest is such a tiny tiny event. It has such a tiny footprint compared to like what Nordics does. And I know, Ken, you're involved in both sides of this equation as well, right? You're involved in organizing events and staffing events. And I have to say, I find the whole idea of event space, while very rewarding, super challenging to do well. I don't know what your experience is on that.
For sure. Well, one little note on that I've noticed, going to RestFest is I saw Mike pretty much 98% of the time that I was at RestFest, every day, all day. And I've been with Mike at probably a good 50, 60 events around the world. And normally when you're at an event and Mike, because I brought Mike to my events to speak, is I see Mike on stage, I'll see Mike in the hallway, and then I'll usually ask like Irakli or Matt or someone, hey, you seen Mike? And he's like, oh, he went for a walk. And so like,
I'm being called out here.
So at normal events, Mike, he has a certain kind of formula and then how he keeps from having his energy sucked too much is kind of how I perceive it. Maybe I'm wrong, but he's always walking somewhere and he's gone and then, but he's there. It's not like he's, people who do keynotes and just go, no, like Mike's there, but he's only got a certain amount of energy to give. Cause I think you're giving a talk, you're outwardly projecting, where at RestFest, you're doing a lot of listening and it's a different mode. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. So some of it is protected, which is what you just mentioned. Some of it is, honestly, I'm in amazing places. Like you bring, your events, you bring me to places I don't get to see. So no, I'm going to go take a walk to that bridge. So that's selfish. That's totally just me selfishly saying, let's go take a walk somewhere. And I drag you or Ronnie or one of my friends or somebody I just met. At RestFest, it is also this notion, it's not about me, but it's just this notion that I'm here to, it's such a small group. I'm really fascinated by what's going on. And a lot of times at larger events, I'm a hallway track person. Like I'm learning so much in the hallway, learning so much off the agenda. And it's super challenging for me to learn in a big room. Just me, I got problems with it. But so I'm often, kind of like a little, bee. I'm kind of pollinating all sorts of them, like I'm checking out all sorts of other things. But the real point of this line of discussion was for me at least, there's a sort of a flip, which is producing versus consuming. So conference events are a chance for me to be a consumer. And that is a very different experience for me. And I was just curious as to others in the room, is that a conscious flip? Or for me it is, but I just wondered if it was the same for anybody else.
Yeah, I love conferences for that very reason. I feel like this diligent note taker, and there's so much I need to get in. And then I'm sort of the keynote kind of presentation learner, but then I have unanswered questions, and then I track that person down in the hallway and kind of transform into what Mike is talking about with that, hallway interrogation approach.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm trying to rework this now because back to your original question, Mike. That this, the symbiotic relationship between events and writing. That's what API Evangelist was. API Evangelist was API Strat and API Days synthesized, and there was a lot of emails and a lot of virtual conversations. And me just learning from others and writing about it, but it was the hallways. It was API Strat was very much. Steve at first was like, hey, where do you want to go in the world? Let's create an event so we can go to all these places. And so that was his first reasoning behind it in 2012. But then who can we get there? Because we want to Bill want to be able to listen to someone and talk to him. But then, I invited them to the event, sometimes paying them. So hey, let's go to dinner too, and let's hang out in the hallway or whatever. And so it was very much who can we get there so I can learn from them and understand. But those hallway that was always if you remember API Strat, we had the hallway experience was purposely designed. When we chose the event, chose the venue, it was all right, here's where people are going to congregate here, and that's a really essential part. And then the restaurant, the bar, the after hours thing, that was always a huge one, which I have to rethink about because I don't drink like I did back then. But that's an essential part of it as well. So, but with API specifications conference, which we're organizing right now, I'm working with Async API on planning their event. We're thinking about one with JSON schema,
Cool.
and cross-pollinating between them all. I want to try to think about this and the virtual conversations that we do. So I would love to keep, talking with you, Bill, about like how, the Nordic APIs, how do we feed that, but then how do we cultivate new speakers? Because that was very much Mehdi and Steve and we were very deliberate on finding new voices and finding new people. I'd love to talk more about that with you. So.
Oh yeah, we could devote a whole nother segment to that kind of side of storytelling, for sure.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, we're approaching the time. This has been great. Thank you. I mean, I would love to, this is API storytelling, so I don't know where we're going to go with it, how we're going to bring people back, how we're going to keep weaving this in, I think, to the overall experience. Because I've got this new show, Breaking Changes, that I'm going to be doing, like, got Mike coming on. I want to, get each of you to come on as part. I want to figure out how do we keep cross-pollinating and supporting each other's shows and events, but mine topics and influence and steering, because I do have a master strategy, master plan. I'm very world domination in my strategy. So I very much want to control the world and steer things. And I'm only half kidding. I actually seriously do like manipulate.
Well, now that you got the hat on, I believe you.
You just need some sunglasses, I think.
Yeah. No, and I gotta get some better shirts. I'm gonna get some more evil, shirts. But no, I really like where Nordic's at. It is the top storytelling place that I point people to, and and I'm serious about this because we're at a point in time where there's a lot of people onboarding to APIs that aren't technical people, aren't hands-on with APIs and the technical, and they really don't understand all the details like we do. And so it's the place that I send people to think about that and to learn and understand what's going on. So, thank you. I think you guys really have your finger on the pulse. You're doing it well. You're doing it right.
Thank you, Ken. Yeah, I really appreciate the kind words. Readers should let us know if they see any gaps in the content, and the blog is open for submissions. Feel free to check out the newsletter if you want some API insights in the inbox. But there's a lot of other contributors in the space, making this all possible too. And I like how you've been, Ken, from the day one, very like cross-pollination. Let's support the community. You've been supportive for people who haven't, been acting well in the space, and help, kind of push them aside even in the past. So that's been very helpful.
Yeah, no, thank you. Well, thanks for coming on. We'll see where we go with this in the future, but let's keep sharing storytelling ideas. I think that back to your comment about Mike about the events, I really want to think about, as we go back to in-person, maybe, I don't know, but how do we keep supporting each other's shows, but how do we share topics and share ideas and feed each other's topics and ideas? Then find new speakers and voices, I think is going to be our challenge. So anyways.
I think we're kind of at a new era, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think we're definitely hitting Crinsley's settlers space, right? From pioneers to settlers. We have a lot of new people. We have a lot of new venues, a lot of new platforms, a lot of new avenues. So it'll be very, very exciting to see what happens in the next year or two in the space.
I like the idea of us kind of owning the trends. Obviously spaces like Gartner and Forrester are nice because they make those trend hype cycles, but we're an industry and we know what we're discussing, and it'd be cool to, like you said, Ken, kind of share what's on the top of mind for people with a bit more transparency.
Well, we'll keep poking at that, see what we can do.
Cool.
Well, thank you, Bill. I appreciate it. Enjoy your Memorial Day weekend, and
thank you.
Look forward to seeing you again in person someday.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
All right.
It's been great. See you later.
See ya.
Well, that was fun. Thank you, guys.
Definitely. Very cool.
Interesting I was totally by accident, like last Thursday, scrambling to get someone for Friday. It's like I got David in Programmable Web and I got Bill from Nordic APIs all in the same motion. So that kind of worked out well.
You're the man.
It was cool to do them back to back too. Like I'm thinking more deliberately about both topics because we had them next to each other. So it was awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
that's good on 3 point.
We already had Matthew Reinbold. We should probably get James Higginbotham on. So the two top newsletters.
Yeah.
Maybe we could have another conversation with Matthew just about the newsletter kind of portion. I don't know. Let's think about that. But definitely James we could get on and have him, and Keith too. Keith would be a good one to get on too. So
yeah,
all
James, right. I'd love to get James on. James is working on a new book project. I'd love to hear more about his upcoming book project too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll ping James and see what we can do. But
cool.
Enjoy your Memorial Day. I'm gonna let Mike go first. I always gotta flip a coin here on who I let go first. But have a good weekend, Mike. We'll see you next time.
See you next week.
Enjoy it. Bye.
Cheers.
Hey.
Well, thank you. Thanks for being here, my friend.
It's been lovely. Have a great rest of your weekend. I'll talk to you soon.
All righty, man. Be safe out there. Have a relaxing Memorial Day weekend. Oh, my dog's telling me it needs to go outside, or I need to play with her. So I'm going to go do that, but we'll see you next week, sir.
See ya. Have a good one.
All right.
Say hi to Poppy for me.
Will do. Hi, Poppy. All right. Well, very cool. I'm going to have to get my backdrop here together next week and figure out this lighting system because I'm a little red. But anyways, this has been fun. We keep it going. I'm pretty stoked. This is exciting. Thanks everyone for tuning in if you've been listening, and we'll see you next week.